Breaking news in the Cardano ecosystem. We've got USDM partnering up with NBX, by far one of the biggest centralized exchanges in the European region, in order to launch the first ever liquidity pool, allowing for Bitcoin users to convert their Bitcoin directly into USDM and to join into the Cardano ecosystem. As a part of today's video, we're breaking down exactly what this announcement means. What's up, Ada Gang? Welcome into Adapt Central, your home for everything blockchain and crypto. I'm your host here for Reed. As I've just laid down the foundation there, a massive milestone with Charles Hoskinson also giving some big kudos to NBX and USDM for making this happen. We've got the first ever launch of the liquidity pool, allowing for Bitcoin users to join very quickly into the Cardano ecosystem. So as a part of today's video, we're going to be number one, breaking down why this is a big deal, then talking about the fact that there's no bridges or wrapped assets involved here and exactly why that matters, followed by a brief breakdown of what the USDM team has been doing, and then talking a little bit more about regulatory clarity and exactly why this is a massive game changer when it comes to liquidity and adoption into the Cardano ecosystem. And as we get ready to close out here, I want to highlight what could potentially come next and give you guys my final thoughts. Now, before I do any of that, if it's your first time stopping by the channel, my goal is to help you find your footing here within the Cardano and Bitcoin ecosystems, breaking down all of the latest and breaking news. If you appreciate that type of content, please smash that thumbs up on the way in. If you want more, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to voice off down below. Now, if you want to extend your support for the channel even further, consider delegating your ADA with either of the two DApp Central stake pools, which share the ticker DAPP. Without any further ado, let's jump right on in here. This was just released by the official USDM or the official Moneta team not too long ago, highlighting that for the first time ever on Cardano, you now have the ability to swap your Bitcoin, not a wrapped version of Bitcoin, but your hard-earned Bitcoin, and that you can now swap that for USDM, gaining direct access to the Cardano stablecoin and the Cardano ecosystem. Now, there's no bridging involved here, so there's no wrapped assets, no sort of trust me bro mentality here. And this is just a native swap taking place again on NBX, which has been working to integrate and support the ability to mint and burn USDM. And they were also, I believe, one of the first ever, maybe the second actually, centralized exchanges to be MiCA compliant and to actually list the USDM stablecoin as one of their core offerings to their European-based community. Now, it states that this is regulated. Again, it's MiCA compliant and FinCEN compliant, and it enables larger arbitrage trades and OTC or over-the-counter style swaps. And it is now available as of June 6th of 2025. So first things first, why is this a big deal? Well, like I just mentioned, this is the first ever native swap between Bitcoin and Cardano, where there's a hard liquidity pool, right, established by a centralized exchange, which is none other than NBX, which gives people access to USDM, which is essentially integrated into the biggest protocols here, including DeFi and DEXs in the Cardano ecosystem. Again, this is done by NBX, and it eliminates wrapped tokens and bridges. Now, while we're on the topic of wrapped tokens and bridges, why is that important? Well, bridges, right, are typically a centralized sort of weak point or an attack vector. And you can think of, for example, the Ronin hack or the wormhole hack. And then in addition to that, right, wrapped assets introduces an assumption, and it also brings in additional potential slippage issues. Now, of course, you've got also things like double spending or double minting that you have to worry about when you're using wrapped assets, which in this particular case is not an issue at all. And so third, let's talk about why USDM is essentially an ideal trading pair. Well, USDM, if you aren't aware, is fully fiat backed, and they're sort of managed, right, through a banking system where they keep track of all of the hard cash that is made to back up USDM. Now, once per day, they do mint USDM, so you've got the ability to mint and burn, meaning that the amount of USDM that's available in the ecosystem will fluctuate over time. But if you want to get a real-time glimpse as to how much USDM is currently available, you're able to do that using the C3 developer portal, where every day they basically allow for you to see how much USDM is currently in circulation and how much USDM has been minted and burned throughout the time. Now, Why is this massive? Well, institutions, right, demand regulation, and this particular pool has it. I mentioned earlier, NBX onboarded USDM back in, I want to say, the Octoberish or maybe August timeline last year, and they worked directly with the USDM team to make the stablecoin, right, which they integrate into their platform, MiCA compliant. Now, MiCA stands for Markets in Crypto Assets, which is a big piece of regulation in the European region that stablecoins now have to meet in order to be traded. So it's already sort of met that hurdle, and it's also FinCEN compliant, meaning that from a regulatory perspective, you can imagine big players, right, that want to get into Cardano or at least into USDM. They'll be able to do that if they hold Bitcoin directly from the NBX liquidity pool that's just been set up. Now I'm going to show exactly how easy this is to actually set up here in just a moment. There's actually a brief review by Stig, one of the key members representing NBX. And I've already reached out to Jillian Plomin here, the CEO and president right now of USDM, or of Moneta, I should say, who built USDM. And I'll be working with them to actually get them on for an interview to break down some of the key importances here or key pieces as a part of this collaboration. Now, again, this opens up the doors for regulated entities to enter Cardano DeFi safely. If you aren't aware, USDM is integrated into Liquid. It's also integrated into, I want to say, Indigo, and they're now also working to integrate, if it's not already, into other leading DeFi protocols. And so you could imagine maybe Strike Finance, right, a derivatives and a perpetuals platform here, which is just launched, but it's also supported amongst all of the biggest dexes in the ecosystem. So if you don't necessarily want to mint and burn, you can actually pick up USDM on SundaeSwap, MinSwap, Wingriders, ViFi, etc. It is pretty easy to get access to right now. If I'm not mistaken, there's around $11 million worth of stablecoins minted, but with this particular liquidity pool launching, I could see that number shifting and changing very, very quickly. Now, before I dive a little bit deeper into why this is a game changer for liquidity, if you missed it, I did sit down with Jillian not too long ago to break down the fact that minting and burning is available for the general public in over 19 different states. And again, if you're in Europe, you can also get USDM through NBX. So Jillian broke down the fact that they're working to expand within more US states and to also grow their presence outside of the USA to essentially become the leading stablecoin here within the Cardano ecosystem. Now, pivoting back over, and I want to also talk a little bit more about NBX, let's just quickly highlight why this is important for liquidity. Well, I mentioned earlier, this gives direct BTC access to USDM in the Cardano ecosystem. And this now also gives the ability, right, for cross-chain arbitrage to occur without needing a wrapped token. In addition, this provides deeper BTC liquidity in Cardano DeFi protocols through USDM. So it might not actually be Bitcoin, right, dumping straight into these yield generating protocols, but it's Bitcoin liquidity that was swapped for USDM. As we get ready to close out, I mean, this is massive because again, this positions Cardano as a serious DeFi hub for institutional investors. It strengthens Cardano ecosystem's narrative when it comes to compliance, scalability, and interoperability. And last but not least, it also expands USDM's role, right, as sort of the base DeFi asset, right, for anybody looking to jump into the Cardano ecosystem. Now let's take a look here at this brief review, and this is being done by Stig, one of the key members from NBX. And he's going to break down exactly how we can actually trade and go ahead and get access from their platform if you got Bitcoin and want to swap that over into USDM.
It's now official. The Bitcoin USDM trading pair is now live on mbx.com. And as usual, I will show you how it works. From the home screen, markets, USDM, Bitcoin, USDM, check the book, select your price, trade, I'll buy for everything I got, buy, success. It's as simple as that.
Keep in mind that if you hold Bitcoin, you can swap for USDM, but if you also hold USDM, you can actually swap for Bitcoin as well. So keep that in mind. This does work in both ways. And while we're speaking about NBX, I also want to highlight the fact that Stig and team have now also mentioned that they've acquired 6 Bitcoin, right, as a part of being Norway's first ever publicly listed Bitcoin treasury company. So they're going to be working to essentially grow their Bitcoin holdings and to use that to reward their NBX holders. So it states at the very bottom, we've already given our card holders 3.78 Bitcoin as cashback, and it's now time to expand their Bitcoin footprint, with their next mile being the addition of 10 Bitcoin before the end of June. So they've got roughly about 3 weeks to essentially double or triple their current Bitcoin holdings. Now, as we get ready to wind things down here, we have Charles Hoskinson, and I obviously cannot read that, but I've taken the time to translate that. And if you appreciate that, please smash that thumbs up. It really does mean a lot. But he states here, I am pleased to see that my brothers in the North have embraced the world's most secure and decentralized cryptocurrency. And no pun intended, I'm not sure if he's referring to Bitcoin or Cardano. Obviously, they're both UTXO bros. And yeah, really just good to see that Charles is in full support of this brand new partnership and access to liquidity here for Bitcoin holders into the Cardano ecosystem. So what comes next? Could this expand to include ETH USDM? I mean, at this point, why not? There's just as much institutional adoption and eyeballs into ETH. And if you're not aware, when it comes to altcoin season, liquidity flows into Bitcoin first, then into ETH, right? And then into altcoin. So if they're essentially looking to position themselves, and I say they as NBX, it probably would be a good idea for them to also set up an ETH/USDM liquidity pool to also allow for ETH holders to quickly join and to jump into the Cardano ecosystem through the USDM stablecoin. Now, there's also the potential for liquidity farming, yield protocols, and perpetuals, again, using BTC/USDM, for example, like with Strike Finance, Liquid, or even LendFi. And then in closing here, this essentially changes how DeFi builders and institutions can now look at Cardano, or will now look at Cardano. And so as I close out here, this isn't just another pool, it's a foundation for Cardano's next wave of DeFi institutions, or DeFi adoption, I should say, for institutions. And I'm excited to be here at this particular time. That will do it here for today's update. If you haven't heard of NBX, or if you haven't heard of USDM, check out the links down below. Make sure to get involved. If you want to mint, you can. Again, watch that interview I just shot with Jillian, and also stay tuned for the upcoming interview I'll be shooting with Stig and Jillian, talking about this brand new launch of the liquidity pool. That will do it here. As always, if you've enjoyed content like this, I would appreciate you if you could smash that thumbs up. If you want more, consider subscribing. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to voice off down below. That said, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.